Welcome to the Well-Rounded Retirement Podcast with John and Jim from CRIS Financial. In this podcast, we help you take a well-rounded approach to retirement planning so you can retire with complete certainty. If you're looking for proven and straightforward retirement advice, ranging from how to protect your assets to how to spend with confidence, this show is for you.
Hello and welcome to Well-Rounded Retirement with Jim Donewald and John Glowaz from CRIS Financial. Jim, how are you?
I'm doing great, Eric. How you doing?
I am doing fantastic. It is a beautiful sunny day, and the temperature right now reads -8.
Excellent. I'm enjoying it a little bit better, but no sunshine.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I'll trade you. I'll trade you any day.
Hey, if it's bright and sunny, I dig that. To me, that makes the day worthwhile.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, what are we talking about today?
Well, today I kind of want to do something a little bit different. I think I've been feeding everybody with a fire hose for a while. So today what I thought I'd do is take a little more relaxed review. My big ask of this program is that my audience, they learn something, number one, and number two, that they actually do something to better their retirement. If you're anything like me, sometimes when you get too much information, it's hard to do anything. And that's no good for anybody. So I thought what I'd like to do today is kind of remind everybody why I do what I do, and just kind of go through this in some pretty basic terms as to kind of how we kind of walk people through the overall process. There's a lot of turns and twists along the way, but the process is very similar for everybody.
Okay. All right. So why do you do what you do?
Well, it really comes when I graduated college. I got a job in the mortgage business, and I had a lot of success very quickly. It was very nice. I loved it. What happened to me was when 2008 rolled around, that financial crisis, I had found that everything that I had been taught really wasn't working. So in that particular case, since I was tied to real estate, both from my job and most of my investments, my job was in jeopardy. My real estate investments were down. The stock market was down. It really threw me for a loop. It really scared the pants off me, to be honest. And I had to come up with a different strategy. I didn't want to live through that again and again and again. Because, of course, at that time, it was kind of caught up in the moment. I wasn't sure what was going to happen. Then I discovered a whole new world of products and strategies that I implemented into my life that really made a difference. And it's become my mission to share this with other people so they don't have that horrible feeling of not knowing what to do. And that's really why I do this. I mean, it was such a light bulb moment for me to realize that, not that the risk isn't bad necessarily, but there's certainly ways to divvy it up and make sure that regardless of what happens, I'm okay. And I was a young father, so I had a husband and a child, and you just can't give up. You have to figure out a different way or a better way, and that was part of what I did. It was a learning process for me, kind of under a panic situation, but I came up with all these new strategies and plans that worked a lot better, that I could incorporate with what I was already doing that was working, that really helped out.
Yeah, and I know that one of your biggest goals is to alleviate the concerns of everybody that you work with. So my next question is, what is the number one concern right now that you are helping people with?
That's a great question. The number one concern, no doubt about it, what we get called on and asked daily is taxes. I understand why. And it's as a matter of fact, I think it's so important that if your advisor, whoever you're going to for help, is not bringing that up, you should really ask them why, because that's super important. Right now, I can't imagine another topic that would be more important to that. So if they're not discussing that, maybe you should be speaking to somebody else. And why? I think it's very simple. Taxes are going up. I can get into all the reasons why, but let's just hit a few of them. Social Security, which most of us have as at least a third of their retirement, if not more. When we first started Social Security, 42 people were paying in for everybody taken out, for every one person taking out. That was a pretty solvent program to begin with. At this day, we got 3 people paying in for every one taken out. You can just kind of see what we're doing as a country as far as what's our national debt these days, $28 trillion. How much money can they push in the COVID relief? I think we're somewhere between 3.5 and 4 trillion for that. Most people, I think it's not a big argument, decide the tax rates have to go up in order to pay for all this, right?
Well, and I guess that was my next question is, how is the government going to pay for it? I mean, this tax rates, is that going to do it, or is there going to be something else?
Well, who knows what they'll ultimately do, but certainly, raising taxes is the most go-to approach. It makes sense, I think from every perspective there. And you got to remember, the government's real good at tracking all our retirement income. You've got those deals that we've made, all this money we've got saved up in our 401ks, our 403bs, our IRAs that we have not paid the tax on. And that's probably the easiest place for them to go to tax that money, at a new rate. We don't know what that tax rate will be. Regardless, though, of what I want to get into is regardless of what clients, ask about. So they ask about taxes, and that's fine. But regardless, when they do that, when they come into our office or we talk to them on the phone, we want to know what they're really struggling with. But, I went to a doctor the other day, and I had my ear was bugging me. It was really bothering me, and I went in there and I asked him, I said, look at this, please look at my ear. I'm expecting him to look down there and say, yep, here's an infection, here's some antibiotics. He looks in, he goes, no, your ear is absolutely fine. I go, really? Well, it hurts like crazy. Bottom line, it ended up being my jaw. Here I'm trying to treat an ear problem that isn't an ear problem at all. I have TMJ, or a minor case of TMJ, which was fine, but it certainly focused how you're going to correct that problem. And it's it's the same thing too. Think about it if you go in to see your doctor, and he says, how you doing today, Eric? And you say, fine. Does he just let you leave? Are you done? Yeah. No, he might want to lift the hood. He might want to take your temperature, your blood pressure, the basics. And that's the same kind of deal. So we want to address whatever their concerns are, but we want to make sure maybe there's not a lot of underlying problems as well. As a matter of fact, I was thinking back when I was saying I wanted to kind of review here. We did a seminar a while back called Biggest Mistakes. I think it was our 8th podcast, something like that. And that's one of those things, too, that I just want to remind the clients, anybody that's listening here, to go back and take these kind of piecemeal. Everything that we talk about doesn't apply to everybody, but there's some basic things that we need to do. And I think that's a great place to start. What are the mistakes? What should I be doing?
And I remember that was a 2-part series, if I'm not mistaken, podcast 8 and 9.
Yes, it was. There's a lot of mistakes out there, but it's not even that. It's just these common things. Plus, what happens too is there's a lot of things that we are taught that they're just coming out differently. I guess they don't work anymore. I don't want to say they're wrong. They were right when they were taught that like you're going to be in a lower tax bracket when you retire. Certain things are going to be a certain way, and that's just not what we're finding. And so it's not that this was bad information. It just needs to be updated, and that's why these mistakes are made. Getting back to taxes, though, because that is the number one question we get asked these days. It's like everything else. We want to take this in simple steps so that we can take some action. And there's really, only 3 places all your money falls. It's either going to fall in the taxable bucket, which is, checking account, maybe your brokerage account. This is your after-tax money. Then you've got your tax deferred, which are your IRAs, your 401ks, your 403bs, and then you have tax free. And you can name anything out there, and they're going to fall into one of those 3 categories. Let's just start with the basics. We need to know what we're working with. Then I think you should make a list of these things so you can see if you're really out of balance. It's not like it should be a third, but you can certainly see if one of your buckets has nothing in it, then you might want to address this. And for most people, the bulk of their assets are in their retirement account. That's just what I see 90% of the time. And it's like anything else. How do you eat the elephant?
One piece at a time.
You got it. You got to get in there and start addressing it.
Yeah.
With predicting future taxes, we don't know. I have a strong belief, and I can talk to anybody, that we think they're going to go up, but they're going to go up dramatically. And we all know it's not what you make, it's what you get to keep. And if you had not addressed how this is going to affect you, I really think you should. And that's part of that podcast we talked about, 8 and 9, where the biggest mistakes made in retirement. And right now, our firm, we run all sorts of reports that we'll do for our clients gratis, as to kind of give them a snapshot of where they're at. So I'm sure your current advisor, somebody has this software. And if not, give us a call. We'll run it for you, because you've got to see where you stand. How can you make any decisions if you're not really sure what the impacts are going to be? We had a client come in the other day, a little bit older, 75-ish. We ran one of these reports here, just kind of showing them the tax implications and some things we needed to do or we might recommend. And as we talked to them more and more, what we found out was really they weren't worried about leaving the legacy, so to speak. They really wanted more money up front now. So even though mathematically it made sense to go ahead and address some of these tax issues, That was not their goal. We ended up not going down that path because ultimately that didn't get what they were really, would it have saved the money? Yes. But that, I don't want to say that wasn't their goal, but that wasn't their main objective. Their main objective was to enjoy more time now, while they were still feeling good before they got too old. Mm-hmm. Once again, you got to know where you stand, and then you got to tell us what you're trying to do, and we can kind of work it through there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, the other thing we do all the time is we have all sorts of options. If you decide that you do want to pay taxes, for example, if you decide that mathematically it makes sense, that's the first question. So, okay, should we, from a math standpoint, okay, because that's the only way I know how to calculate that is to see what we're saving now and what we're giving up later, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And then if we're going to do that, do we agree the price of admission, as we always say, is you have to pay these taxes? If you're not willing to do that, that's certainly your right. And if you are willing to do that, then we've got all sorts of options. So some of the simplest ones, we believe that nobody's going to get into the tax situation they want to be in retirement without doing numerous things. A Roth IRA if you're still working. Roth 401k if your company offers it. Roth conversions, which are the workhorse of this. If you think about it, the Roth conversion as it stands today has no limits. You just have to pay the taxes on what you're converting. Mm-hmm. It's got no income limits. This is a beautiful thing. Not that anybody wants to start converting $300,000 a year from IRAs to Roths, but you could. There's nothing stopping you there except the cost of admission, as we talk about. Mm-hmm. That's huge for those people who make too much money. They can't do some of the Roths. They're in the phase-out part. There are some certain cash value life insurance products that work very well, that accomplish a lot of these things. I'm in Katy, Texas here. We're right off the oil corridor, and we have some oil execs and some people that make a lot of money, and they have different problems. Or I shouldn't say that. They have the same problems, but we have different solutions for them. Mm. And one of the things we can do for them is we talked about one of our podcasts, I think it was the podcast 14, our alternatives, ways to pay taxes, not necessarily out of your pocket. One of the plans that we had was a matter of borrowing money from a life insurance policy. And this stuff is very cool if you're into that kind of thing, if you qualify for that, if that's what you're looking to do. It's really quite interesting the way it works, and it's very good for people if that's what they're looking for. Once again, we will make recommendations based on what the math indicates and what's the best situation, but then we have to put that in alignment with your goals.
Yeah, and like you said, we don't know exactly what the taxes are going to be in the future, but we're really, really sure they're going to go up. That's all there is to it. And so I know that you said everybody has to do the math, and you and your team can run reports to help somebody figure all that out, especially when it comes to these different options that you're talking about. You had said, well, if you don't want to pay the taxes, that's one thing, but regardless, they're going to pay taxes, right? No matter what, they're going to pay them sometime. It just depends on when the best timing is. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, even our great strategies do not entail no taxes. It's just a matter of paying them now versus later. Yeah, I wish I could. I'd be so busy. But
yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, thanks for correcting on that. No, everybody's going to pay the taxes. It's just, does it make sense to pay them now versus later? That's what you did, or pass them on to your children. That's another one people forget sometimes. They say, well, okay, I'll leave this money to my children, which is perfectly acceptable. But even them, let's say, depending upon, when you had your kids, you might be passing away while your children in their peak earning years, and so they're going to inherit this IRA money, and that goes right on top of, like I said, if they're already in their late 40s, 50s, this might be their peak earning year. So it's something to consider. Like I say, you have to figure out what the goals are and how you want to structure it and see if it makes sense.
Yeah, and I remember that you even... you spoke about this on a previous podcast also, that somebody that inherits an IRA, because of the changes in the tax code or the laws, there's no more stretch IRA, right? It's not something that you can stretch out for a long period of time. They've got to take all that money within 10 years. And if they're in those peak earning years, that's a chunk every year that they're going to have to add to their income, which of course then increases their taxes. But there's also some math in that you guys can help them figure out to know exactly how much they should be taking to make sure it doesn't become more of a tax burden, correct?
Yeah, you've been listening. That's great.
I'm learning. I'm learning.
That's good. Well, that's the whole idea. Every now and then you just got to hear it over and over and over again. But you're absolutely correct. Yeah, the stretch would used to be one of our go-to, which one of my favorite things, watching that money compound over many, many years, and it's just gone. And that's why I say even now with the Roth conversions, I haven't heard anything. But who knows? At some point, will they eliminate anything? So it makes sense to do now versus later, if it makes sense. We run it all through the computer because there's so much to keep in mind. I mean, even though I got a financial degree and I can do these formulas on paper, but you can't do it like a computer. Where what happens if my provisional income? What happens with this tax rate? What happens? And it takes that all into account to give us a very good, reliable answer. And that's what it makes sense, right? So if I'm going to inherit this, is there a way to take some of the sting out of that or get more bang for my buck?
Yeah. I mean, everybody's situation is so different, Jim, that I love the fact that you've spoken about this many times, is that you and your team take the time to know exactly what the situation is. Because if somebody's inheriting an IRA before they retire, and maybe they want to retire early, and that would really give them the ability they could take what they were going to get in their income out of that IRA, and it doesn't really even change their tax burden hardly at all, because they get to retire a little early and they're just using that instead. But somebody who's 40 is still working, and like you said, it could become a tax burden. So everybody's situation is different. So you have to put all those different things into your program, including all their goals and hopes for what they're going to do with their family, and then be able to calculate what is the absolute best strategy. I mean, to me, that's fun. I mean, I don't know. That's just how my brain works. I love solving puzzles. And to me, that's kind of what you're doing.
Well, that's the same way. And that's exactly what people say. What do I do? I have the title of a financial advisor, but I'm a problem solver. And I'm with you. I like the challenge of that. I like to look at things in new and different ways. That's why I say some of these alternatives that even I keep learning are they're not for everybody, but for those certain few that it fits, it is remarkable what you can accomplish that most people aren't even aware of. And that was like I say, that podcast I was talking about. I think it's called Alternative Tax Pain or something along those lines. I don't know if you can correct me on that, but it was something along those lines. And it gave some different perspectives on some ways too. Because I had a client come in here, $1 million in his IRA, nothing in the tax bucket. That he just didn't have any money in the tax bucket, and we found a way for him to start shifting some of that money, paying those tax dollars not out of his. I mean, he's paying it out of his money, but we were able to create it from a loan from an insurance policy so that it was a net positive effect for him. So he could eliminate some of those taxes, start moving it to the tax-free bucket without really cash out of his pocket, if that makes sense. There's more to that, but that's kind of the concept of how it worked.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, what are some other concerns that we need to cover today?
Well, I'm going to hit this one. I would normally leave this for last, but I just don't want it to get lost, and that's the long-term care potential. Nobody wants to think about this, and I'm kind of in that same bucket. I understand, but when I hear people say, I really don't have any money to do that, that's probably who should be more concerned than anything, because what we do these days with long-term care is leverage. So even if you have as little as $50,000, we might be able to leverage that into $100,000. So if you don't have the funds to work with, all the more reason to plan ahead if you can. It's it's not for everybody, but most likely, I think it's 70% of us will spend some time in some kind of facility. The odds are not in our favor. I didn't want to think about that when I was doing my own retirement plan. I didn't get excited about the long-term care section, but I did address it, and I have to tell you, it's nice. It's still not the driving force. It's still not what I think about. The way I put the plan together, it's really designed to do a whole bunch of other things. But in the case that I need money for my health care situation, it's there. Same with my wife, and that's huge because, like I said, I don't want to go down that road. But if we end up down that road, I'm going to be better off than I would have been if I had not addressed it. It's just that simple. Yeah,
I mean, you can't be an ostrich, right? You can't put your head in the ground and the sand just think it's not going to happen. You already said the statistic. I think 70%. That the odds are definitely not in our favor. And so why make it more stressful and more of a burden on yourself or maybe even your family by just ignoring it?
And I hate to say it too, but for the most part, the men, we have a little shorter lifespan typically, but regardless, whoever gets sick first, you don't want that. Nobody's trying to get sick, and your spouse shouldn't pay the ultimate price for that either. I mean, here you have a very rosy retirement, and then one of you, becomes sick. You don't want it to destroy your retirement on top of losing your life partner. I mean, that's brutal. So that's part of it, and then we also talk about indexing a lot too, just for safety. And the way we set up a lot of these long-term care, what we call wellness benefits, is through products where there's other benefits to it. So it feels like you're not paying for it, even though you're paying for it. Don't get me wrong; we're not giving these for free, but you're getting other goals that you can use while you're alive, not just when you pass away. And if you pass away and you've never used this money goes to somebody. It's not a use it or lose it situation where so many of the old policies, it's like nobody wants to go to the nursing home, but if you got it, you're covered. But if you die in your sleep, nobody gets the benefit of those funds. So it's in my opinion, it's just an easier way to think about it. It's a rough conversation as it is, and it just makes it a little easier.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, the other probably what I kind of want to finish up on here is just other kind of risks. I love this one. I heard this a while back, and I really like this. And it was talking about the average return for this stock or the average return for this investment. And I wanted to remind our listeners here about averages. And I was reading a book. I can't remember what book it was, but it says, okay, I've got one foot in the fire, and I've got my other foot in a block of ice. But the average is it feels pretty good.
I don't know if I've ever heard that before.
Yeah, that's kind of the truth of the averages. I've seen the number example lots of times where it all averages to a 4% return or a whatever, but you just see the way the numbers come in, your actual principal balance can be dramatically different. Mm-hmm. One of the things we like to do, I'm not anti-market in the slightest, but I do like to, as people get older, have some more money protected. And we use what are called like a volatility buffer, where you have some kind of instrument that can't lose value. So when the market's down, if you did nothing else but every year the market was down during your retirement, took from this other plan, what that does for your overall returns is dramatic. Because once we get into retirement and less of a lifetime of earning, it's just statistics. We don't have the time to recover like you do when you're 20 or 30. Hopefully, everyone retires and the market does great for 10 years before you have any problems. But if you retire and the market is having a bad 10 years, this can really affect your retirement. And we try to, like I said, think ahead, problem solve, make sure that this is not a problem for our clients.
Yeah. Well, and that's just it. If you look back on historically, when we've had some market corrections or concerns, it's been every 8 to 10 years. Mm-hmm. You retired right in the middle, in between them. Well, you had maybe 5 good years. But what if you retired right before, right?
Right. And do you know when those 5 or 10 years are coming? That's just
exactly.
it. I think we're pretty smart at our firm, but I still can't tell you that. I wouldn't I wouldn't make those predictions ever. Part of our overall strategy too is isolating risk. You can say any way you want. We talk about worried about averages, indexing, but it's isolating risk. It's making sure that there are some of my funds I can get to no matter what, so my other funds can grow and I don't have to take them out at an inopportune time. And that to me is the key of life. Balance. Yeah. Balance, a little bit of planning. You know how I feel about planning, and I say that all the time. So some plan's better than no plan, and then refine it. Start, if you're hearing us for the first time today, start by doing something. Just have a plan. Make that list. Here's what's in the tax bucket. Here's what's in the tax deferred bucket. Here's what I have in the tax-free bucket. If you don't have anything in the tax-free bucket, address that. Shift to a 401k Roth, a Roth 401k. Start today. It's not too late. It's never too late.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, this has been a great review of why you do exactly what you do, because, you've got a lot of passion behind the puzzle solving, the problem solving that you do with your clients. Any closing thoughts for today's podcast?
We put a lot of emphasis on the math behind our recommendations. I do a lot of analysis, which is very exciting. No, but it's good. You want to know what you're working with, and I want to explain to my clients why I'm recommending what I'm recommending. And if through the diversification and tax principles, long-term care events, if we can push our clients ahead in their retirement so that there's more income to spend or leave or match their goals, this is what we do. If that's the kind of work you would like done, we'd love to do it for you.
All right. Well, tell them how. Tell them how to get a hold of you. Yeah.
Well, you can call our office at 281-665-3081 or go to CRISFinancial.com. Feel free to call us, though. We're still open for business during COVID and taking calls promptly and meeting clients either in person, Zoom, whatever you guys feel comfortable with. We do wash our offices all the time. We wear face masks. We'll make you comfortable, or we're more than happy just to have a Zoom meeting. Most people are comfortable with that these days, so we can share a lot of information just over the telephone and over the Zoom meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. And like Jim alluded to a couple times at this podcast, they've already produced quite a few podcasts, a lot of great information. So please, if this is your first time listening, or even if this is your third time listening, go back and look at the list of different subjects that they've brought to the table here, because it has been very robust. And again, like Jim said, not everything's going to fit everyone, but you're going to find gold nuggets in here in these podcasts that are going to really make you think about what you're doing with your plan and how you can have that and start that conversation with Jim and his team. So again, thank you so much for listening today to the Well-Rounded Retirement Podcast with Jim Donewald and John Glowas. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when Jim and John come out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. This makes it much easier to share these podcasts with your friends and family. Again, thanks so much for listening today. For everyone at CRIS Financial, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Well-Rounded Retirement Podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of CRIS Financial. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service providers with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.